Top story at this hour, a Class 8 textbook has created controversy in India. The inclusion of a chapter titled Corruption in Judiciary in Class 8 social science textbooks has not gone down too well with the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice of India, Suryakant. Hearing began today in the Supreme Court of India over a chapter titled Corruption in Judiciary in a Class 8 social science textbook published by National Council of Educational Research and Training, the NCERT. Appearing for NCERT, Solicitor General Tushar Mehta tendered an unconditional apology and informed the court that the book, although printed and released in the market, has now been withdrawn. However, the Chief Justice of India made it clear that court would not accept any apology at this stage. He observed that accepting it would set a wrong precedent and said that the dignity of the institution cannot be compromised. The Chief Justice described the issue as a major calculated move that portrays the judiciary as corrupt, adding that in digital age, thousands of copies may already be in circulation. He remarked that a bullet once fired cannot be taken back and the judiciary today is bloodied. The court also took serious note of media reports on the issue and directed the Secretary General of the Supreme Court to examine how details were reported in the media. The Chief Justice said that possibility of a larger conspiracy cannot be ruled out. Senior advocate Kapil Sibal argued that while politics and executive were left untouched, the judiciary was singled out in a textbook. The court recorded that the chapters include a reference to hundreds of complaints against the judiciary, selectively quoting a former Chief Justice in a manner that would suggest institutional corruption. The Supreme Court of India has banned the NCERT Class 8 textbook chapter that referred to corruption in judiciary. The court prohibited any publication, reprinting or digital circulation of the book and ordered for immediate seizure of all physical copies. The director of the National Council for Educational Research and Training and the school principals were told that the books must be sealed and it's their personal responsibility to seal all the copies and submit compliance report within the next 2 weeks. All chief secretaries have been directed to ensure implementation. Show cause notices have also been issued to the Educational Ministry and its Secretary, NCERT Director Dr. Dinesh Prasad Saklani, asking why contempt proceedings should not be initiated against them. Calling the matter serious, the court observed that such acts could amount to criminal contempt for interfering with the administration of justice. The Supreme Court says the matter is far from closed or over and a full investigation is now underway.
को भी ये बात अच्छी नहीं लगी थी। कल परसों भी हमसे कुछ लोगों ने प्रश्न किया था तो मैंने कहा था कि ये बहुत ही आपत्तिजनक है या ऐसी ढंग का चैप्टर नाबालिग बच्चों के सामने ये परोसना या देश के सामने ये परोसना बड़ा ही अनुचित है और इसका कहीं से कोई जस्टिफिकेशन नहीं हो सकता है। तो बार भी इस पर आक्रोशित था और बार आक्रोशित है। तुरंत आदेश दिया है कोर्ट ने कि सारी किताबें हटा ली जाएं। जो भी डिजिटल मीडिया के वजह से या डिजिटल माध्यम से जो भी ये परोसा गया है सबको तुरंत वापस किया जाए।
All right, joining me on the show is my colleague Brijesh Pandey, who's tracking all those details. Brijesh, the controversies become bigger on the day too, with Supreme Court yesterday saying that this was an attempt to defame the judiciary. Today, the CJI says that this looks like it was a conspiracy. It was done so on purpose.
Well, absolutely, and I think what has happened is that even the government is taken aback with the kind of vehement stand the court and also the bar has taken vis-a-vis the publication of NCERT book. See, the Chief Justice, and if you look at the statement which has been made by Chief Justice, usually they adopt a very more magnanimous attitude when an article or tweets on social media appear which is criticizes the functioning of the government or certain judgment or the aspects of judgment, brushing it under the carpet, saying that that this is freedom of speech and it's all right. We don't pay heed to what is written on the social media and we don't allow it to we don't allow ourselves to get affected by it. But I think the courts and the lordships have taken a very strong view of the publication of what was published in the NCERT book for Class 8, and they've said that what is troubling the court is that they said that this looks like a conspiracy. And if you look at the sentence which has been used by the Chief Justice, that a bullet has been fired and the justice and the judiciary is bleeding. I mean, it's one of the harshest statement which I've heard from the Chief Justice in almost last almost a decade. And and this is the reason why he has refused to accept unconditional apology by the NCERT, by the Solicitor General Tushar Mehta. When he rendered one, he rejected it, saying that accepting it will allow future precedents, people encourage people to indulge that, and they are not going to stop investigation till they reach the bottom of it as to what was the exact reason why the court was portrayed in a negative light before the class 8 students.
Right. Brijesh, there's a very divided opinion here. On one side, of course, is the bar and the bench, which is categorically stating that this looks like an attempt to taint the judiciary, to paint the judiciary in a negative light by only pointing out the flaws within the judiciary while leaving out the executive and the bureaucracy, which is where there's a lot of corruption anyway. On the other hand, there is another coterie of people saying that we all are aware of the kind of corruption that percolates down in judicial system. So what's the harm in talking about it?
Well, it all depends on from where you are judging the entire scenario. The fact of the matter is that, when unaccounted cash was found, it was widely reported, and the court also expressed its displeasure about the fact that how this much cash was found, and they took steps to make sure that a proper investigation was done. But the argument of the court, and especially of the bar, is that, when you single out the judiciary, when you single out, like if you have, there are 4 organs, when you're talking about judiciary, legislature, and executive, and then you talk about, what are the positives and the negatives of all the 3 branches or the organs of the constitution or the democracy, then they say that it makes sense. Then it is not like you feel that you have been specifically singled out for that there is corruption in judiciary, and they're saying that, when you are doing a higher hypothesis, or you are doing a larger study which is concentrated on the functioning of the court, and in that, if you are singling out that there's corruption in the judiciary, and you're going and you're quoting the court of the ex-CJI for that particular purpose, that would make sense. But this particular, talking about corruption in judiciary for class 8 student was, the court and the bench very strongly believe that this is like prejudicing them and like, telling them and making them to believe that the court is corrupt, and that there's a sizable section of it which is corrupt, which indulges corruption, and what it does is that it tarnishes the image of the judiciary. So they're saying that, that nobody stops from criticizing the judgment. There's always, whenever a judgment comes out, there's criticism of the judgment, and it's not like, the judiciary has not been criticized, or the cases of corruption which has come out in the light has not been reported by the media. But when you start teaching children that there's corruption in judiciary, but you're not making a mention of legislature, and you're not making a mention of executive, then this means that they're specifically singled out and targeted in this fashion. This is the big objection of the judiciary.
Absolutely. And a lot of conversation, of course, also bringing in the case of Yashwant Verma, the High Court judge, Allahabad High Court judge, at whose place the wad of cash was found, and post which an inquiry was instituted in the matter. But, coming to a critical point of putting a chapter dedicated to corruption in judiciary in a class 8th textbook. Conversation, of course, on whether class 8 students who are pre-teens are too early to be exposed of this kind of conversation. On the other hand, Brijesh, we're living in a free world where there's ChatGPT, there's Perplexity, there's enough and more internet access, and kids are free to Google what they want. I think the contention here is that you're deliberately teaching people about the flaws of a certain institution while leaving other organs of the democracy out, which include the legislature and the executive, and it's the selective criticism which is drawing, the court's anger.
Well, see, nobody is stopping a student or a kid or, an adult to Google and find out about corruption in any branch. Whether in judiciary or whether about, whether they feel strongly about any judgment which has been given, nobody is stopping them. It's like, nobody is stopping the internet, or nobody is policing the internet. But what the purpose of this particular criticism and why the judges have taken an umbrage is, it's like, coaxing the student to believe in a particular sentiment, which is that there's judiciary in India and there's a section of judiciary which is corrupt. So, they are saying that you are actually forcing the kids, or you are leading the kid to a suggestion which leads to believe that, the section of the judiciary is corrupt. And when a class student reads it, the class 8 student, starts believing in it, then you will give rise to a generation of students who have started believing that judiciary is corrupt, and it tarnishes the image of the judiciary. The judiciary still remains the final adjudicator as far as interpretation of law or passing judgment is. But if you have a vast section of society which has no faith in the system, then it creates a very classic catch-22 situation.